Good to see everybody this morning. Was there anything that we needed to pray about this morning that hadn't, maybe not on our anything that anybody knows about? I know that Junior seems to be doing a little bit better. Jimmy Cornigy, they said they were trying to get him up and walking around, so he was doing pretty good. I hadn't heard anything from him last night or this morning. It seems like things are going well to him too. Any other thing that we need to know about this morning? Don't forget our singing Friday night. That's the 24th. We got some new song books, and we're going to kind of sing songs and look at some of those new songs in there, maybe learn a new song or two. So looking forward to that too.
Going to eat after we get through.
Going to eat after we get through too. So I think we're going to have some finger foods that. Looking forward to that. Hadn't been able to get together and do much stuff like that here lately. Seems like that. Looking forward to it. I guess all of y'all are like me this morning. You got up and your wife was telling you how much she just got up thanking you for all the things that you did for her. And, today is National Wife Appreciation Day. So your wife should have got up this morning thanking you for all the stuff that you've been doing for her. I'm glad none of the ladies are in big trouble. Anyway, it is good to see everybody this morning. We'll be in 1 Samuel chapter 24 this morning. Let's have a word of prayer as we get started here. Most gracious, kind Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the blessings of life. We thank Thee for the spiritual blessings that we have in Christ, and help us in this life, and that we might become more like your Son, Jesus Christ, and help us read and study the Bible so that we might know how you'd have us to live. We thank Thee for the physical things we have in this life and for our health, and we thank Thee that you've been looking over people who've been sick, and would ask you to continue to do so. Be with us now as we study in this class, and help us to gain a good knowledge of the things you'd have us to know. Be with us in the things that we do. For these things we do ask in Thy Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen. 1 Samuel 24, this kind of a short chapter, but anyway, if you'll think back, here we just in reviewing just a little bit here, God through Samuel made David, anointed David as king. He's not really the king yet, but he is anointed to be so. So it's kind of like that period in between our elections, where there's a period in there where people we vote to be president, aren't president until they're inaugurated. In that, I guess in one sense, that's kind of what's going on here. But with the aid of his friend Jonathan, David knows that Saul is out to kill him.
What chapter are we in again?
Chapter 24, 1 Samuel 24. Also, I'd like to welcome those who may be viewing online too. But David's now on the run and we read how he takes various measures from being captured or killed by Saul. And that's just something all of us would do. Somebody's after us. We make preparations, or we do things that will prevent us from being harmed spiritually or physically. But in chapter 23, David, along with about 600 men, goes to Keilah Keilah and delivers them from the hands of the Philistines. You know, that was a Jewish city, and the Philistines were taking it over. But David and his men go there, and they prevent that, or they battle with them and overtake them, deliver them from the hands of the Philistines. David God tells Saul, God tells David. One of those days, I guess y'all have to keep me straight this morning. But God tells, or lets David know that Saul's in pursuit. If David stays there in the city, that the city will turn him over to Saul. So it says David and his men go wherever they can. I wasn't sure if that meant that they disbanded, but I don't believe it does, because I believe it's in chapter 26. It talks about the 600 men are still together. But anyway, they leave the city there and go. David goes to the wilderness of Zim in the strongholds of the mountains, and meets with Jonathan and Horish. And from there, David goes to the wilderness of Maon, where Saul almost captures him. You know, David's on this side of the mountain, and Saul's on this side of the mountain. All that has to happen is Saul go over there and get David, it would seem. But God intervenes here, or through the providence of God, however that happens. You know, God works in those days, worked in various ways, you know. But anyway, Saul almost captures David, but Saul's called away to fight with the Philistines, and David leaves the rock of escape and goes to the strongholds of En-Gedi, But that's what they named that place where David had evaded Saul there, the rock of escape. So, and he goes to En-Gedi, but I was looking there within the wilderness of Judea is the En-Gedi, and that's a settlement there. And it happened to be somewhat of like an oasis, you know, that you get out in the desert and all of a sudden you see this water and palm trees and things that look pretty good there. But the En-Gedi was a settlement there within the wilderness of Judea, and I think sometimes it is referred to as maybe the wilderness of En-Gedi also. I might be wrong in that, but it's within the wilderness of Judea. I was looking at some pictures of that, and it's just the Hebrews called it a desolate wasteland. It was a lifeless terrain of rocks. It was on the shores of the Dead Sea, and it is sometimes they refer to it as the Wild Goats Rocks. I mean, I saw a picture of it, and it's just, I don't know, looks like just rocks, you know, with little valleys in it. And, I can see how it would be a desolate place, you know, probably wild goats are about the only thing that can move around in there. But that's where David goes to En-Gedi, which is the settlement. And I saw also a picture of the En-Gedi there. It looked like a pretty nice place. It had a waterfall, and it said that nowadays people go there, you know, just to enjoy themselves. But it had a big waterfall and this big pool there. But anyway, starting in chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, and I'll read the first three verses, and then we'll comment on them. But and this is the American Standard Version of 1901 that I'm reading from. And it came to pass when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men of all Israel and went to seek David and his men upon the rock of the wild goats. Rocks of the wild goats. And he came to the sheepcotes by the way where there was a cave, and Saul went in to cover his feet. Now David and his men were abiding in the innermost parts of the cave. So you I was also looking at some of these caves. You know, I think of a cave as maybe kind of like a double doorway, not much bigger than that. I've seen bigger caves, but they're not. But I saw some pictures, and these were huge caves with the looked like an opening about as big as this building here. I mean, they weren't little small caves, and they must have went back into in the mountain pretty deep. But they were a lot bigger. The pictures I saw of some of the caves there were a lot bigger than what I had imagined them. But here, Saul's fight with the Philistines had ended, and he had been informed where David was. You know, it seemed like somebody's always telling Saul where David is. But Saul and his 3,000 men were camped in front of the Wild Goats Rocks, or there where the wilderness of Judea started. And there was and there's sheep pens there. That's when he talks about it. And they came to the sheep coats. By the way, what does it say in another version? Sheepfolds.
Yeah.
That's what I've been used to reading. This was I don't guess I'd looked at this version when I studied this, but it says the sheep goats coats. C-O-T-E-S. Does anybody know what that is? Coats. I looked up.
Corral, just corral type thing to keep sheep.
Well, here, as this started, you know, as this desolate place started, was En Gedi, you know, down the shores of the Dead Sea. But it must have been a kind of like an oasis, you know, because they brought sheep in there, you know. But anyway, that's where we find David, and Saul is also there. He has 3,000 men, and they were camped in front of right there where they start. And I suppose that was for some type of military strategy, I would think. I mean, I don't think Saul would take 3,000 men and just rush right into all those mountains and desolate place and find. But I suppose, and this just me, it's not in the Bible, it's not scriptural, but it's just me thinking that probably Saul brought his 3,000 men there to where this the wilderness of Judea started, and he's probably going to make a strategy on, you know, you go this way and we'll go this way, we'll whatever. But they met there, and there was a big cave there. But I suppose they were making military strategy for a capture of David was being made. There's a cave in front of where the rocks start, and Saul goes in to relieve himself. But what he doesn't know is David and his men are in the back of the cave. Something else I noticed in this. It says, and Saul went in to cover his feet. That was another version say, relieve himself.
Relieve himself. This author says that he likely took off his outer robes and laid it down, you know, so he could go do his business. So that's where we get to the rest of it here.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible has its way of explaining things in a good way, I guess. But it says he covered up his feet. I don't know just what, you know, sometimes when you relieve yourself, that's what you do, is you kind of, as you let your clothes down, they cover your feet. And I suppose that's what this is saying. I don't know. But anyway, I just thought that interesting just then. But he goes in there to relieve himself. What he doesn't know is is David and his men are there in the back of that cave. I used to think, well, now that's, looks like Saul was seeing them. But like I said, these are huge caves. David and 600 men, or how many ever were with him at that time, they could have hidden themselves probably very easily. So, any question, comment on verses 1 through 3?
Brother Clifton, in a former study of Samuel, the caves, when they talk about the caves, it's not like caves that we look at here in the United States, where it's a small opening, and then it opens up in hallways and passageways. These caves over there are mostly just overhangs. And they can go back pretty deep, but they're just overhangs with wide openings. And Saul would have his men sitting at the front of the opening when he went in to take care of whatever he needed to take care of. David and his men were further back in what they call the cave, but they could not be seen because of the shadows. And that's how David, and I don't know if you've gotten to that part yet, where he goes and cuts off a piece of Saul's robe. It's amazing to me that even in this wide expanse of what they call a cave, that Saul could not hear somebody else step on the rocks and make sounds.
That, and I don't, this just came to me, Tom, but I saw a picture of that in Getty, and there's a huge waterfall, and it empties into a big pool there, and it could be that, and this is just me, it could be, the sound of the waterfall is pretty loud, it could be that waterfall in there could have caused some, a lot of noise that would prevent Saul from hearing David. But David was, it says, in one version I was reading, it said he was stealth. He was pretty slick as he went up there, but that may have, the waterfall noise could have had something to do with it. I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us that, so, but appreciate that, Tony. So, any other question, comment? Verses 4 through 7. Reads there, and the men of David said unto him, Behold, the day of which Jehovah said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thy hand, and thou shalt do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privately. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, Jehovah forbid that I should do this thing unto my Lord, Jehovah's anointed, to put forth my hand against him, seeing he is Jehovah's anointed. So David checked his men with these words, and suffered them not to rise against Saul. And Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. Here in verse 4 through 7, David's men saw this as an opportunity provided by God for David to rid himself of Saul. It seems that God had spoken to David, in ways that his enemies wouldn't, he'd deliver his enemies into his hand, and that's what happens here. But Saul and David, men saw this as an opportunity for David to kill Saul or get rid of Saul. But David does not let David doesn't let this opportunity slip away. He secretly cuts off a piece of Saul's robe while Saul is relieving himself. But the killing of Saul, you see, that doesn't sit well with David because Saul is the Lord's appointed. They had great respect for things of that nature in that day, as we still do today. I mean, I respect the office. I don't agree with the things that our president is doing, but I respect that office. And because he's the president of the United States. Saul was the king of Israel, and David respected that. Because he was the Lord's appointed with this thought in mind, he persuades his men not to kill Saul. I mean, they're up in arms and ready to take Saul out. But Saul leaves the cave, never knowing David was there. David had to be pretty stealth, or pretty quiet and slippery in his doings here. Brother Dupree.
Looked like it bothered him just cutting his part of his garment, you know. If he regretted doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened after David's heart troubled him because he had cut Saul trouble. You know, that's tell you the difference between Saul and David. You know, one reason, you know, see got David's heart, God after man after God's own heart. You know, Saul should have had that same attitude toward David. You know, he was, by this time, Saul knew that David was God's anointed, you know, come after him. But we see the difference in the two men and how they're different as far as God's appointed.
Yes, Saul had become an evil. You know, as we talked about earlier, you know, the spirit had departed from Saul, but you know, when the spirit came upon Saul when he was anointed, you know, but it left because of Saul's behavior. But it says that when the spirit came upon David, you know, when he was anointed, it didn't leave David. So here Saul is, and that's not God's doings of making somebody evil or making somebody good. It's just man's doings, personal doings of each man. But you know, God reacts to how whatever man has chosen, the way man chooses to go, whether it's good or evil. Brother Glenn.
Saul was first anointed king. He was one of the most powerful men in Israel.
That's right.
He could let the power of those in his head and thought that he didn't have to was no more accountable to God for some reason. But he just kept getting worse and worse. And that's the progression of sin. We can see that. And we let sin creep in and how it just gets worse and worse.
We go to depending on looking to ourselves sometimes. I've seen good Christians, good strong Christians, and seem to be real knowledgeable, and all of a sudden they go bad. I mean, I don't know a better way to, but anyway, they leave the faith and go off into some, I don't know, some path that's not proven by God. So I don't know exactly what happened to Saul, just why he turned. I can see a lot of, you know, it's kind of like Solomon, you know, when he was getting all that stuff and power, you know, and that's kind of getting to Solomon too. So riches, you know, are sometimes a downfall to man. We have to be careful in how we handle those things. But
I think power, you know, the Bible talks a lot about pride.
pride,
I think that is, you know, First Corinthians, I think, talks about pride.
your pride will get you in trouble just as well as your eyes will sometimes desire things. Verses 8 through 15. But anyway, Saul relieves himself, and David cuts off a little piece of his robe, and then Saul is finished with his business and gets up, stands to go out, so he leaves. And in verse 8 it says, David also arose afterward and went out of the cave and cried after Saul, saying, My Lord the king, and I'm going to go through 15 here. And he said, My Lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth and did obedience. He honored the king. obeisance. And David had said to Saul, wherefore hearkenest thou to men's word, saying, behold, David seeketh thy hurt. David saying, why are you listening to men that I'm trying to hurt you? Behold, this day thine eyes have seen how that Jehovah hath delivered thee today into my hands in the cave, and some bade me kill thee, but mine eye spared thee, and I said, I will not put forth my hand against my Lord, for he is Jehovah's anointed. Moreover, my father, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of thy robe, and kill thee not. Know thou and see that there is neither evil nor transgressions in my hand, and I have not sinned against thee, though thou hurtest after my life to take it. Jehovah judge between me and thee, and Jehovah avenge me of thee, but my hand shall not be upon thee. As saith the proverb of the ancients, out of the wicked mouth, out of the wicked cometh forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be upon thee. After whom is the king of Israel come out? After whom dost thou pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? Jehovah therefore be judge, and give sentence between me and thee, and see and plead my cause, and deliver me out of thy hand. You see, Saul gets up. David spared his life. Saul gets up to leave, and David follows after him. David is a brave man. He has a lot of courage. Just like us, we ought to be brave and courage, and we don't do physical battles, but in the spiritual war that we have, we ought to be brave and courageous. The things that we do, it's not always an easy thing to go out and teach people, or go out to a brother or sister and talk to them about, how they're living or something. But we all have to be brave. Christians have to be brave and courageous. But here Saul leaves, and David goes after him. And he bows and he calls out to Saul, and says, hey, Saul, I don't know how but anyway, David goes after him and lets Saul know, he lets him know he could have killed him. He says, look, here's the corner of your robe. I slipped up and cut that off. He says, but he didn't, because Saul is the Lord's appointed. He's not going to do anything against God. And that's what he's trying to tell Saul. He says, he says he's not a wicked man. And David's not, but we learned that David is a man after God's own heart. There's no wickedness in the heart of God. But his intentions are not wrong. He doesn't have anything against Saul, and he's not. He says there's no treason. David's not going to overthrow the Saul. He says that's not his intentions here. He says he's loyal to the kingship of Israel, and he is. David hadn't really done anything against Saul. It's just Samuel has anointed him to be the next king over Saul's son, and Saul was jealous because if something happened to Saul, David said it would not come from David's hand. David wouldn't do it. He said, but the Lord, he'll do something about it. But Saul's destiny and David's destiny, the outcome of this matter between them, he says that was in the hands of God. David's telling Saul, I don't have anything to do with this. He said, but if you are killed, if something does happen to you, he said, it won't be by my hand. He said, it'll be by the Lord's hand. David's not trying to cover up the evil that Saul's doing. I mean, you know, sometimes we try to do that in our lives. You know, we try to cover up the wrong of other people by, I don't know, by building up some good thing that they're doing. But David's not, and we shouldn't either. I mean, we should be honest with one another because it will determine how we interact with one another, encourage one another, and help one another. The things we do for one another sometimes will have a lot to do with our destinies. You know, but here, and it's, you know, even today it's up to God. You know, God determines what's good and what's bad through His Word to us. But here, you know, David's telling us all, you know, I don't have anything against you. You know, all of this is in God's hand, and it's through God's direction or through the things that God's done that I'm doing what I do. They both, but the outcome of this matter between them was in the hands of God. They both knew God would deliver David from the hand of Saul. I mean, he says that in that section there. Brother.
You know, this all started when the women were singing, Saul has killed his 1,000 and David has killed his 10,000. That hurt Saul's pride. And that got him all found up and said, ever since then, he's been trying to kill David. Because David was more honored by the people than he was. He didn't like that.
There's a lot of things in life that will cause us to go against the proven ways of God. I mean, I don't know, sometimes somebody may do a little something and then something else and then maybe a little something big that, you know, goes against our, I mean, it's not really anything unscriptural. It's just something that goes against the grain of how we think it should be going. And it irritates us, and sometimes it can cause so much disruption in ourselves and the way that we take that is against God. I mean, sometimes there wasn't nothing wrong with David being more successful in battle than Saul, but Saul made it something bad. So we can take things in life that are not bad, and we can become jealous or prideful or however you want to put that, and they can become wrong. So you know, we just have to watch ourselves like Saul didn't, you know. But as long as we have the Spirit or are guided by God's Word, which is having the Spirit today. But if we always have God's Word or the Spirit of God guiding us, then we should be okay. It's when we depart from that, like Saul, you know, the Spirit left Saul, departed from Saul. But any other comments?
You know, David was fighting Saul's battles.
I don't know.
Earlier chapter, he had to go fight the Philistine because Saul was concentrating on something that he had no business concentrating on.
You know, I guess sometimes in congregations or preachers, I've seen it in preachers, sometimes we get a little jealousy or pride because one congregation isn't growing quite as much as because somebody baptized more than they did, kind of like in Corinth there, but they were kind of going to the extremes there. But you know, there was jealousy that had developed there, or pride to, you know, I'm a Paul and I'm of Apollos, you know, and they kind of got off on the wrong path there, the same as Saul's doing here. But anyway, they both knew that God would deliver David from the hand of Saul. I mean, that why Saul kept on pursuing him and knowing that, I don't. But verse 16 through 19, it reads, "And it came to pass when David had made an end of speaking these words to Saul, that Saul said, Is this thy voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to David, thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rendered unto me good, whereas I have rendered unto thee evil. And thou hast declared this day how thou hast dealt well with me, for as much as when Jehovah hath delivered me up into thy hand, thou killest me not. For if a man find his enemy, will he let him go well away? Wherefore Jehovah rewarded thee good for that in that which thou hast done unto me this day. So here was, when David had finished speaking, Saul realized that what David was saying was true, and he had been evil. He had been wrong in his pursuing David. By not killing Saul, David had revealed his righteousness. You know, our righteousness, our faith, things that, our faith, our righteousness is revealed or it's manifested in the way that we act. Still, Saul was an evil man, but there's still honor here with Saul. Honor, I suppose, in the manly way, I suppose, because it wasn't honorable what he was doing in God. But here on this day, I believe that Saul is honorable, in that he lets David go. But by not killing Saul, David revealed his righteousness, and Saul acknowledged his evil against David and was going to let him go this day. And I think that, I don't know how does that read in, let me find it. Verse 19, there at the end of the verse, it says, thou hast done unto me this day. How does another version put that? Would somebody read verse 19 of 1 Samuel?
You King James,
Same thing. I think Saul is saying, because you've let me go this day, because of what you've done, you had to kill me, but just clip the corner. He said, I'm going to let you go this day. Because, it's not long until Saul's right back after him. But I believe it's just an honor, an agreement, an honorable agreement between men that that if you, in battle, I've seen pictures, World War II, where people would quit battling just for a little while and honor something, to stop them battling. I believe in World War II, they stopped, like during Christmas sometimes they would, or maybe Civil War or something. I've read
That was World War I.
World War I.
There was truce, this was in 1914 and 1915, I think, when the British and German soldiers called a brief truce over Christmas, and they actually celebrated Christmas together in World War I.
I think that's similar to what's happened here. It's not an occasion, but it's a honorable thing among soldiers or men having want to put that Saul says, yes, I'm on, because of what you've done, because you didn't take my life this day, I'm going to let you go. And I believe I don't know, but I think that has a lot to do with what's happening here. Any other questions or comments? And then in verse 20 through 22, it says, and now behold, I know that thou shalt surely be king. That's what Saul says. And that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in thy hand. Swear now therefore unto me by Jehovah that thou wilt not cut off my seed after me, and that thou wilt not destroy my name out of my father's house. And David swore unto Saul, and Saul went home, but David and his men gathered them up into the stronghold. here, you know, Saul did not serve God as he should, but he knew what God had said was going to come about. You know, he said, remember back when I believe it was Agag, he said, but thy neighbor shall take up the kingship. I forget just how it was put there, but at that point, God said that told Saul through Samuel that somebody would take the kingship from him. Thy neighbor who's better than thee, I believe is how I put it. But Saul knew David would be king one day, and at this time, he makes David swear he would not cut off his offspring after him, nor destroys Saul's name out of his father's house. And David agreed to that. You know, David had agreed, made that same agreement with Jonathan. You know, Saul's not saying, you know, that David would swear that he wouldn't become king. He's just saying that he would not destroy Saul's name. You know, a name to people then, you know, I'm a Parker. And that means something to me because that's my family. You know, and I don't want anybody ever coming along and kind of ripping me apart from that part of my life. You know, I always want to be a part of the good side of the Parkers family. all my family, you know, just perfect or anything, which I guess all families are like that. But I don't want nobody disassociating me with my name. That's kind of what Paul's saying. He said, don't remove me from my father's house. You know, don't, you know, here we read about Saul and how David treated Saul. And Jonathan, you know, he kept part of, he made sure that part of Saul's family was continued in a royal sense with the kingship. I mean, he had Jonathan's son, I believe it was, when a lot of them were killed, he spared Jonathan's son so that name would continue on. But it just kind of summarized in chapter 24, you see David's still running from Saul, but David spares Saul's life. Saul acknowledges his faults and takes an oath of David, you know, about his name and his children, and then they depart. And that's kind of how 24 ends there. Next Sunday morning we'll do Samuel 25. Tony, were you teaching?
Yes.
So Tony will be teaching.